Thanks for tuning in to Crazy Manga Stories. Give a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for more betrayal stories. Alex closed the front door with a gentle click, his eyes trailing over the muted glow of the kitchen light. Emily's voice carried from the other room, breezy and carefree, as she wrapped up what sounded like a phone call. "Yes, I'll see you soon," she chirped, before adding in a softer, playful tone, "Miss you already." He froze mid-step, his pulse quickening. Something about her tone, a mix of excitement and intimacy, set his instincts ablaze. For weeks, Alex had felt the undercurrent of something unspoken in their marriage. It wasn't overt. A late-night shower after drinks with coworkers, a strange name in her texts quickly brushed off as a colleague, or the distant smile she wore when she thought he wasn't looking. Each moment was a grain of sand small enough to dismiss on its own, but together they formed the shifting dunes of suspicion. As Alex entered the living room, Emily glanced up from her suitcase with a practiced smile. "Oh, hey," she said lightly. "You're home earlier than I expected." He nodded, setting his briefcase down on the chair. His eyes fell on the open suitcase, half-packed with colorful sundresses and sandals. "Business trip?" he asked, his voice steady, almost casual. She laughed, her tone too bright. "Not exactly. I'm going to visit Mom for a few days. She's been feeling a little lonely lately." Alex tilted his head, studying her carefully. "I thought your mom wasn't a fan of tropical vacations," he said, nodding at the hibiscus-printed sarong draped across the couch. Emily's smile faltered for a split second, a micro-expression most wouldn't catch. But Alex did. "Oh well, you know her," she said, recovering smoothly. "She's trying new things lately. Anyway, I should finish packing. My flight's early tomorrow." "Which airport?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Logan," she replied, not meeting his eyes. "Why?" "No reason," he said, stepping back. "I'll let you get to it." Later that evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Alex sat at the dining table with her plane ticket in hand. He'd found it in the trash can, hastily crumpled but not torn. The destination wasn't her mother's small-town airport. It was Cancun, a romantic escape, not a family reunion. The confirmation of his fears didn't hit him like a thunderclap. It seeped into him, cold and corrosive, pooling in the pit of his stomach. For a moment, Alex considered confronting her then and there, demanding the truth. But something held him back. No, he thought, not yet. The next morning, Alex was up before Emily. He booked a flight to Cancun, selecting a seat right next to hers. With that done, he went about his day, careful to keep his demeanor unshaken. Emily kissed him goodbye with the same cheerful pretense she'd worn the night before, her lie as smooth as her lipstick. As she drove away, Alex stood at the window, watching her car disappear down the street. "Let's see how you like surprises," he murmured to himself, his jaw set. He wasn't just going to catch her. He was going to make her face the weight of her betrayal. Alex arrived at the airport hours before the flight, his mind as sharp and methodical as the spreadsheets he'd built his career on. The crowded terminal buzzed with the murmur of travelers, but Alex's focus never wavered. His carefully orchestrated plan had begun, and every detail had to be perfect. He found a seat in a quiet corner near the gate, positioning himself so he could observe without being immediately noticed. His pulse quickened as he visualized the confrontation to come. Every move he made now was a prelude to that critical moment, one that had to be as devastatingly precise as a scalpel. He couldn't leave anything to chance. The first step had been ensuring that Emily wouldn't suspect him. In the days leading up to her departure, Alex maintained a facade of normalcy. He helped her pack, even suggested a few items she might want to take. His easygoing demeanor allowed her to relax, and by the time she left for the airport, she was confident that her secret was still safe. That confidence would be her undoing. The second step was subtle but essential, making himself invisible. Alex dressed simply, choosing muted tones and a baseball cap to blend into the sea of travelers. With his boarding pass tucked neatly into his jacket pocket, he moved through security and toward the gate without a second glance. He had rehearsed his expression, a mix of disinterest and mild exhaustion, so no one would suspect that beneath his calm exterior, his emotions were simmering just below the surface. At the gate, Alex scanned the crowd, his eyes moving over faces until they landed on her. Emily was sitting near the large glass window, a paperback novel in her hands. She was radiant, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, her lips curved in a faint smile. It was a smile Alex hadn't seen in years, one reserved for someone else now. Beside her, an empty seat awaited, and Alex knew exactly who it was meant for. He didn't sit too close, choosing instead to settle a few rows back where he could observe without being noticed. Every detail mattered, the way she checked her phone every few minutes, her gaze darting toward the entrance to the terminal. She wasn't looking for him. She was waiting for someone else. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching like an eternity. Alex watched the other passengers gather around the gate, couples exchanging quiet words, children tugging at their parents' hands. He wondered how many secrets were buried among these travelers. How many of them carried lies as carefully concealed as Emily's? Then, just as boarding was announced, Alex saw him. Mark, Emily's lover, arrived with the easy confidence of a man who had everything he wanted. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded a charm that seemed practiced, calculated. He smiled when he saw Emily, leaning in to kiss her cheek before sitting beside her. The two of them exchanged a few words, their laughter quiet but intimate. To anyone else, they were just another couple on a romantic getaway. To Alex, they were thieves, stealing the life he had built with Emily, one lie at a time. The urge to confront them surged, but Alex held himself back. Not yet, he reminded himself. There was a time and place for everything, and this wasn't it. As the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, Alex rose and joined the line, ensuring he was just far enough behind them to remain unnoticed. His heartbeat was steady, his breathing measured. The moment was drawing closer, and he needed to stay in control. On the plane, Alex slid into the seat next to Emily and Mark. Emily froze, her smile faltering as her eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The air between them felt thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Alex turned to her, his expression calm, almost kind, and said with chilling simplicity, "Fancy meeting you here." Mark looked between Alex and Emily, his confusion quickly morphing into unease. Emily stammered something unintelligible, her usual composure shattered. The power had shifted, and Alex was firmly in control. The stage was set, the players assembled. Now, it was time for the next act. Alex arrived at the airport hours before the flight, his mind as sharp and methodical as the spreadsheets he'd built his career on. The crowded terminal buzzed with the murmur of travelers, but Alex's focus never wavered. His carefully orchestrated plan had begun, and every detail had to be perfect. He found a seat in a quiet corner near the gate, positioning himself so he could observe without being immediately noticed. His pulse quickened as he visualized the confrontation to come. Every move he made now was a prelude to that critical moment, one that had to be as devastatingly precise as a scalpel. He couldn't leave anything to chance. The first step had been ensuring that Emily wouldn't suspect him. In the days leading up to her departure, Alex maintained a facade of normalcy. He helped her pack, even suggested a few items she might want to take. His easygoing demeanor allowed her to relax, and by the time she left for the airport, she was confident that her secret was still safe. That confidence would be her undoing. The second step was subtle but essential, making himself invisible. Alex dressed simply, choosing muted tones and a baseball cap to blend into the sea of travelers. With his boarding pass tucked neatly into his jacket pocket, he moved through security and toward the gate without a second glance. He had rehearsed his expression, a mix of disinterest and mild exhaustion, so no one would suspect that beneath his calm exterior, his emotions were simmering just below the surface. At the gate, Alex scanned the crowd, his eyes moving over faces until they landed on her. Emily was sitting near the large glass window, a paperback novel in her hands. She was radiant, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, her lips curved in a faint smile. It was a smile Alex hadn't seen in years, one reserved for someone else now. Beside her, an empty seat awaited, and Alex knew exactly who it was meant for. He didn't sit too close, choosing instead to settle a few rows back where he could observe without being noticed. Every detail mattered, the way she checked her phone every few minutes, her gaze darting toward the entrance to the terminal. She wasn't looking for him. She was waiting for someone else. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching like an eternity. Alex watched the other passengers gather around the gate, couples exchanging quiet words, children tugging at their parents' hands. He wondered how many secrets were buried among these travelers. How many of them carried lies as carefully concealed as Emily's? Then, just as boarding was announced, Alex saw him. Mark, Emily's lover, arrived with the easy confidence of a man who had everything he wanted. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded a charm that seemed practiced, calculated. He smiled when he saw Emily, leaning in to kiss her cheek before sitting beside her. The two of them exchanged a few words, their laughter quiet but intimate. To anyone else, they were just another couple on a romantic getaway. To Alex, they were thieves, stealing the life he had built with Emily, one lie at a time. The urge to confront them surged, but Alex held himself back. Not yet, he reminded himself. There was a time and place for everything, and this wasn't it. As the final boarding call echoed through the terminal, Alex rose and joined the line, ensuring he was just far enough behind them to remain unnoticed. His heartbeat was steady, his breathing measured. The moment was drawing closer, and he needed to stay in control. On the plane, Alex slid into the seat next to Emily and Mark. Emily froze, her smile faltering as her eyes widened in shock. For a brief moment, no one spoke. The air between them felt thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Alex turned to her, his expression calm, almost kind, and said with chilling simplicity, "Fancy meeting you here." Mark looked between Alex and Emily, his confusion quickly morphing into unease. Emily stammered something unintelligible, her usual composure shattered. The power had shifted, and Alex was firmly in control. The stage was set, the players assembled. Now it was time for the next act. "You said, N. Unfold the third part for me in 800 words so that it does not repeat itself." ChatGPT said, N. Part 3. The Discovery. The moment Alex spoke, the veneer of Emily's calm shattered like fragile glass. Her hands trembled as she gripped the armrest, her eyes darting nervously to Mark, who sat frozen in place. Mark's confidence had evaporated, replaced by a creeping unease. It was as if the ground beneath them had shifted, and Alex stood as the unshaken center of gravity. "I wasn't expecting company," Alex continued, his voice steady, almost conversational. "Especially not on this particular flight." Emily's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mark glanced at her, then back at Alex, clearly struggling to piece together the situation. His initial reaction was to laugh it off, a weak attempt to dismiss the tension. "This is awkward," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Awkward?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "I suppose that's one word for it." The plane's engines roared to life, filling the cabin with a low hum as the final passengers settled into their seats. Alex leaned back, his posture deceptively relaxed, but his mind was sharp, his every word chosen with precision. Emily found her voice, though it was barely audible. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "I might ask you the same thing," he replied, his gaze unwavering, "although I already know the answer." Her cheeks flushed, and she averted her eyes, unable to meet his piercing stare. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his bravado crumbling as the weight of Alex's presence pressed down on him. "I booked this trip last minute," Alex said, his tone conversational. "Funny coincidence that we ended up on the same flight. Or maybe not so funny, depending on how you look at it." Emily's lips parted as if to protest, but Alex held up a hand, silencing her. "Save it, Emily. I've been doing some thinking these past few weeks. Some investigating, too. And, well," he gestured vaguely toward Mark. "Here we are." The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, but the tension at row 17 was palpable, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Alex noticed the curious glances but ignored them, focusing entirely on the two people seated beside him. Mark cleared his throat, attempting to reclaim some semblance of control. "Look, Alex, I don't know what you think is going on here, but—" "You don't." Alex interrupted, his voice laced with sarcasm. He reached into his carry-on and pulled out a folder. "Then let me clarify." He opened the folder, revealing printed screenshots of text messages between Emily and Mark, photos of their clandestine meetings, and the itinerary for their trip, complete with the reservation confirmation under Mark's name. Emily's face went pale, and Mark's jaw tightened as he stared at the damning evidence. Alex let the silence hang for a moment before continuing, his tone now icy. "You know, I wasn't sure what I'd find when I started digging. But this is a masterpiece of deception. Secret lunches, late-night rendezvous, even this romantic getaway paid for, I might add, with funds you siphoned from our joint account." "That's not true," Emily blurted, her voice a desperate whisper. "Really?" Alex tilted his head, feigning curiosity. He held up a printout of a bank statement. "Because this says otherwise." Mark shifted again, his discomfort palpable. "Listen, Alex, I think we should all just calm down. Maybe talk about this." Alex turned his attention to Mark, his eyes narrowing. "Calm down. I am calm, Mark. In fact, I've never been calmer in my life. You, on the other hand, seem a little rattled." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Alex continued, cutting him off. "Let me make one thing clear. You don't get to dictate how this goes. Not after sneaking around with my wife and thinking you could get away with it." Emily looked as if she might cry, her hands clutching the seatbelt buckle as if it were a lifeline. Alex, please. Please what? Alex's voice hardened. Please understand. Forgive you. Pretend like this never happened. Is that what you were hoping for? Her silence was answer enough. The plane began to taxi down the runway, and Alex leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. Here's the thing, he said after a moment. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came here to make sure you knew that I know, to watch you squirm, to give you a glimpse of the fallout that's waiting for you when we land. Emily's breath hitched, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Mark stared straight ahead, avoiding Alex's gaze entirely. This flight will be long, Alex said, his voice calm but loaded with menace. I suggest you use it to think about what happens next, because once we touch down, the lies stop. The truth comes out, and trust me, the truth will make your little escape plan seem like a bad dream. For the remainder of the flight, Alex remained silent, his presence a looming reminder of the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Emily fidgeted, casting furtive glances his way, while Mark sat rigidly, his jaw clenched. As the plane began its descent into Cancun, Alex allowed himself a small, grim smile. The confrontation had only just begun, but already the balance of power had shifted. By the time the wheels touched the ground, both Emily and Mark would know the full weight of what they had done, and just how much they stood to lose. The plane cabin hummed with muted activity as passengers settled into their seats. But in row 17, a private storm was brewing. Alex sat calmly, his body angled slightly toward Emily and Mark. His presence was unignorable, a quiet sentinel overseeing their unraveling. Emily shifted in her seat, trying to appear indifferent, though her fingers gripped the armrest tightly. She stole quick glances at Alex, her lips twitching, as if debating whether to speak. Meanwhile, Mark's confidence, so evident in the terminal, had melted into a fidgety unease. His eyes flickered toward Alex, then away, avoiding direct contact. Is this your idea of a joke? Emily finally muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the engines. Her tone lacked conviction, and Alex seized on it immediately. A joke? Alex echoed with a faint smile, his voice louder than hers, ensuring she couldn't dismiss him. That's an interesting choice of words. Do I look like I'm laughing? Emily glanced around, her cheeks flushing as she noticed the occasional curious glance from nearby passengers. She leaned closer to Alex, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Lower your voice, Alex. We don't need to make a scene. A scene? Alex's tone was calm, but the intensity behind his words was unmistakable. Emily, you brought this scene to life. I'm just here to watch how it plays out. Mark cleared his throat, his attempt to intervene more for his own benefit than anyone else's. Listen, Alex. No, Mark, Alex interrupted, turning his attention to the other man. I think you've said enough already. Or should I call you James, Thomas? Which fake name do you prefer these days? Mark's face reddened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Alex wasn't finished. You know, I've seen the receipts. The private dining rooms, the boutique hotels, the late-night Uber rides. Very creative ways to disguise your little rendezvous. I'll admit, at first, I thought maybe it was just bad business judgment on Emily's part. But then, well, here we are. Emily's head snapped toward Alex, her composure slipping further. Alex, please. Let's not do this here. Why not? Alex leaned back, crossing his arms. You were bold enough to lie about this trip to my face. Why shy away from the truth now? The plane jolted as it taxied onto the runway, and for a brief moment, the motion silenced them. Mark glanced out the window, avoiding eye contact while Emily's hands trembled in her lap. Alex noticed everything. The faint sheen of sweat on Mark's temple, the way Emily's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. They were unraveling, piece by piece. You know, Alex said after a pause, his voice softer but no less cutting, I used to trust you implicitly, Emily. I never thought to question your late nights, your sudden need for me time. But you made one mistake. What mistake? Emily whispered, her voice quaking. You underestimated me, Alex replied coldly. He reached into the seat pocket in front of him and pulled out a slim envelope. Do you recognize this? Emily's eyes widened as she saw the edge of the itinerary poking out. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her, his fingers tapping against his leg in a nervous rhythm. I found this in our trash, Alex continued. Sloppy, really. And when I saw the destination, I thought to myself, well, that's odd. Emily's mother lives in Ohio, not Cancun. Emily opened her mouth, likely to deny or deflect, but Alex didn't give her the chance. So I dug deeper. I tracked every charge, every text message, every missed call, and the pieces fell into place. Imagine my surprise when the man you said was just a friend turned out to be more intimately involved. Mark finally spoke, though his voice was tight. Look, Alex, I think this is a misunderstanding. Emily and I. Save it, Alex snapped, his calm exterior cracking for the first time. I'm not interested in your excuses. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to discover this? To realize that while I was working late to provide for us, you were plotting vacations with him. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but Alex felt no sympathy. He had rehearsed this confrontation in his mind, preparing himself for her pleas, her excuses. None of it would sway him. I thought I'd surprise you, Alex said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I thought maybe, just maybe, I was wrong, that this wasn't what it looked like. But seeing the two of you here, laughing, holding hands, it's everything I needed to confirm. Emily's tears spilled over, but her voice was barely audible. Alex, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Alex tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Didn't mean for what, Emily? For me to find out? For your lies to catch up with you? The plane's engines roared as it prepared for takeoff, and Alex leaned back in his seat, letting the silence between them stretch. His words hung in the air, heavy and final, as the plane began its ascent. For the rest of the flight, Alex remained silent, staring out the window as the clouds passed by. Emily fidgeted beside him, her breathing uneven, while Mark sat stiffly, his hands clenched into fists. Neither of them dared speak, knowing that anything they said would only deepen the chasm Alex had created between them. As the plane descended into Cancun, Alex allowed himself a grim smile. The real reckoning was still to come. This was only the beginning. As the plane taxied to the gate in Cancun, the tension in row 17 was palpable. Alex remained calm, his gaze fixed ahead, while Emily and Mark exchanged panicked glances. The silence between them was suffocating, broken only by the occasional announcement from the flight crew. For Alex, the real confrontation was just beginning. Once the plane came to a stop, Alex leaned over, his voice low but firm. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk off this plane like civilized adults. Then we'll have a conversation about the mess you've created. Emily's lips parted as if to protest, but Alex's piercing stare silenced her. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly regretting his involvement in this situation. Without another word, Alex stood, retrieving his carry-on from the overhead bin. The other passengers moved around them, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their midst. The three of them exited the plane, their steps synchronized by circumstance rather than choice. Alex led them to a quiet corner of the bustling airport, far from the prying eyes of other travelers. He turned, his expression calm but his voice loaded with authority. Talk, Alex demanded, his arms crossed over his chest. Emily hesitated, glancing at Mark, who seemed to shrink under Alex's gaze. I didn't mean for you to find out this way, she said softly, her eyes welling with tears. Alex's laugh was bitter, cold. Find out? You mean find out that my wife has been lying to me for months? That she planned a romantic getaway with someone else while telling me she was visiting her mother? Mark stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Alex, look, I know this looks bad. Looks bad. Alex interrupted, his voice rising slightly. It is bad, Mark. You're sleeping with another man's wife. There's no version of this that doesn't make you a liar and a cheat. Mark flinched, his confidence faltering. No, Alex said sharply, cutting him off. You don't get to speak. Not yet. Turning to Emily, Alex's voice softened, but the edge of betrayal was unmistakable. Emily, I want to hear it from you. Why? Was I not enough? Was our life together not worth anything to you? Emily's tears spilled over, her voice trembling as she spoke. Alex, I never wanted to hurt you. I swear. It just happened. Alex's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. It just happened. That's your excuse. An affair doesn't just happen, Emily. It's planned, it's deliberate. And judging by the extent of your deception, you've been planning this for a long time. Mark, emboldened by Emily's tears, tried to step in again. You don't understand, Alex. It's not as black and white as you're making it out to be. Alex turned on him, his voice icy. You're right. It's not black and white. It's red with the blood of the trust you two killed. Mark fell silent, his bravado utterly crushed. Emily sniffled, her voice barely above a whisper. I was unhappy, Alex. I didn't know how to tell you. Unhappy. Alex echoed, his voice hardening. So instead of talking to me, instead of working on our marriage, you decided to lie, to cheat, to sneak around behind my back. And you think that excuses this? Emily opened her mouth to respond but faltered under Alex's steely gaze. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive. Alex finally shook his head, his voice filled with quiet fury. You've destroyed everything we built, Emily. For what? For a fling. For someone who can't even look me in the eye without squirming. Mark bristled, his pride wounded, but he held his tongue. Alex's attention remained on Emily, his words sharp and deliberate. Would you even understand what you've done? The trust we had is gone. The future we were building shattered. Emily sobbed openly now, her shoulders shaking. Alex, please, she whispered. I still love you. Alex's laughter was bitter. Love me. If this is your idea of love, Emily, then I don't want it. Love doesn't look like deceit. Love doesn't lie or sneak around. Love doesn't plan vacations with someone else while looking me in the eyes and saying, I love you. The harsh truth of his words hung in the air, unrelenting. Emily clutched at her chest, as if the weight of his disappointment was physically crushing her. Mark, for his part, seemed to shrink further into himself, his earlier confidence obliterated. Alex finally stepped back, his expression cold and resolute. Here's what's going to happen. Emily, when we get home, you're going to pack your things and leave. I'll have the divorce papers ready. And Mark, he turned to the other man, his voice a low growl. Stay out of my sight. If I ever see you again, I won't be responsible for what happens next. Neither of them responded, their silence speaking louder than any words could. Alex nodded, satisfied. Good. Enjoy your vacation, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm before walking away. As Alex disappeared into the crowd, Emily and Mark were left standing in stunned silence. The weight of their actions had finally caught up with them, and there was no escape from the wreckage they'd created. By the time Alex stepped off the plane back home, he felt a strange sense of calm. The confrontation had played out exactly as he'd imagined, every word carefully chosen, every truth exposed. Emily and Mark had stayed behind in Cancun, their guilt and humiliation trailing them like shadows. Alex, however, had no intention of letting this betrayal define him. There was work to be done, and he intended to rebuild his life, piece by piece. The first thing Alex did was visit his lawyer's office. Sitting in the bright, modern conference room, he explained everything to Patricia, his divorce attorney. She listened attentively, taking detailed notes, her pen moving briskly across the legal pad. You've gathered strong evidence, Patricia said, flipping through the photos, messages, and receipts Alex had meticulously documented. This will make things very straightforward in court. Given the financial deception on top of the affair, I'm confident we can ensure a fair division of assets. Alex nodded, his resolve firm. He wasn't interested in revenge anymore. He wanted closure, a clean break that would allow him to move forward. I just want to get through this, he said. The house, the accounts, just make sure she doesn't take more than what's fair. Patricia smiled reassuringly. We'll make sure of that. Later that evening, Alex returned to the home he and Emily had once shared. The house felt different now, emptier, colder. The memories etched into its walls felt distant, like echoes of a life that no longer belonged to him. Emily hadn't returned yet, and Alex used the solitude to pack up her belongings. Each item he placed into the boxes told a story. The photo albums of vacations they'd taken together, the framed wedding photo that once hung proudly in their living room, the little mementos they'd collected over the years. Alex worked methodically, his movements steady and unhurried. This wasn't an act of anger but of finality. When he was done, he left a note on the kitchen counter. Your things are in the guest room. Collect them by the end of the week. It was short, direct, and devoid of emotion, the perfect reflection of how he felt about her now. In the days that followed, Alex began reaching out to friends and family, sharing the truth about what had happened. At first, it was difficult to say the words aloud, to admit that the life he'd worked so hard to build had crumbled. But as he spoke, he found an unexpected strength in their support. Alex, you didn't deserve this, his sister Laura said during one of their phone calls. She was a fool to throw away someone like you. His best friend, Michael, echoed the sentiment. You're better off without her, man. This is a chance to start fresh. And slowly, Alex began to believe it. He threw himself into his work, finding solace in the structure and predictability of his career. The numbers, the spreadsheets, the meetings, they were a welcome distraction from the emotional turbulence he was navigating. He also started therapy, recognizing that the scars of betrayal wouldn't heal on their own. As for Emily and Mark, their lives didn't fare as well. Word of their affair spread quickly among their mutual acquaintances, and the judgment came swiftly. Friends distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the web of lies and betrayal that had unraveled. Mark's reputation in his professional circle suffered, his charm no longer enough to mask his actions. Emily reached out to Alex once, leaving a voicemail filled with tearful apologies and pleas for forgiveness. "Alex, I know I made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice breaking. "I miss you. I miss us. Please, can we talk?" Alex deleted the message without replying. There was nothing left to say. Weeks turned into months, and Alex began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. He sold the house, using the proceeds to move into a sleek apartment downtown. The new space was smaller, but it felt liberating, a clean slate untainted by the past. He joined a gym, started attending networking events, and even signed up for a cooking class, rediscovering parts of himself he had neglected during his marriage. One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his new apartment, a glass of wine in hand, Alex reflected on the journey he'd been through. The betrayal had shattered him, but it hadn't destroyed him. He had faced the truth, endured the fallout, and emerged stronger for it. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Alex was no longer afraid of the unknown. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. As the city lights sparkled below, Alex allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The chapter with Emily was closed, and a new story was beginning, one he would write on his own terms.